My name is Darcy Ellison and I am 34 years old. 3 weeks ago, my older sister stood at a podium inside the Whitmore Convention Center in Richmond, Virginia, in front of 411 people, investors, journalists, and the 3 partners of the Meridian Bridge Venture Fund, and accepted a $2.4 million seed grant for a software platform she did not build, could not explain, and had not written a single line of code for. The platform was called Bridgelight. I wrote its first algorithm on a legal pad in a studio apartment in Durham, North Carolina, on a Tuesday night in February 7 years ago, eating cold rice from a takeout container because I had $38 in my checking account and no time to heat anything up. The room was full. The applause was real. My sister was wearing a navy blazer and pearl earrings I recognized immediately because they had belonged to our grandmother. She had not earned those earrings. She had not earned that grant. And she had not earned the name on the slide behind her that read, Bridgelight, founder and CEO, Renata Ellison. But here is what Renata did not know when she walked to that podium. Sitting in the 3rd row, in a gray wool dress and flat leather shoes, was a woman named Dr. Constance Farrow, the chair of the Meridian Bridge Selection Committee. And in my bag, on the seat beside me, was a manila envelope containing 47 pages of dated documentation, source code commits with my login credentials, a signed consulting agreement from 2018, 3 emails from Renata asking me to explain concepts she could not define, and a letter written by a woman who had died 14 months earlier and had seen all of this coming long before I did. Before I tell you what happened in that room, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if this story is already speaking to something in you. Drop your city and the time it is where you are in the comments. I read every single one of those. Now let me take you back to the beginning, to a house on Cedarwood Drive in Roanoke, Virginia, and the specific way a family can teach one child that her mind belongs to everyone else. Growing up, there were 2 daughters in the Ellison house, and we were not raised the same way. That is the simplest and most accurate sentence I can write about my childhood. My mother, Patricia Ellison, was a woman who organized her love the way she organized her pantry, by size and presentation. Renata was older by 3 years, taller by 4 inches, and blessed with a social ease that my mother understood and valued the way she valued a clean kitchen. Renata walked into rooms and people turned toward her. She had the kind of laugh that made adults feel included. At 13, she was already the kind of girl my mother could introduce at a dinner party, and my mother introduced her at everyone. I was the other kind. I was the one in the corner reading a hardware manual at age 11. I was the one who took apart the family's second television to see how the signal converted, and who put it back together correctly, and whom my mother still looked at with a slight furrow between her brows, as if competence in the wrong form was a kind of embarrassment. My father, Gerald Ellison, was a quiet man who managed the accounts department at a regional insurance firm. He was not cruel. He was simply absent in the way that certain fathers are absent, present at the dinner table, unreachable everywhere else. He followed my mother's lead on matters of the children, and my mother's lead always pointed toward Renata. There was a science fair in 6th grade. I built a working model of a binary sorting system using cardboard, wire, and a 9-volt battery. My teacher, Mr. Holt, pulled me aside afterward and said, with a kind of careful deliberateness I didn't fully understand at the time, "Darcy, I want you to remember that you built this. Not anyone else. You." I didn't know why he said it then. I do now. I placed second in the district. My mother put the ribbon in a kitchen drawer. When Renata won a regional speech competition 3 weeks later, my mother framed the certificate and hung it in the hallway. I am not telling you this to make you pity me. I am telling you this because it matters for what came later, the specific architecture of how I was taught to hand things over. There was one person in my family who saw it differently. My grandmother, Estelle Ellison, my father's mother, lived 40 minutes away in a farmhouse outside of Salem, Virginia, and she called me every Sunday at 11 in the morning from the time I was 8 years old until the week she died. She asked about what I was working on, what I was reading, what I was thinking about. She never once asked me about my grades or whether I had a boyfriend or what I was going to do about my hair. Estelle had been a bookkeeper for 31 years. She understood numbers the way I understood systems, as a language that did not lie. She used to say, sitting at her kitchen table with her hands wrapped around a mug of black coffee, "Darcy, the people who take credit for things they didn't build always get found out eventually. The work tells the truth even when the people don't." I carried that sentence for a long time before I understood how precisely it applied to my own life. When I was 17, Estelle sat me down in her kitchen and told me she had set up a small savings account in my name at a bank in Salem, not Roanoke, Salem, and that she had been putting money into it for 9 years. "It's not a fortune," she said. "But it is yours. Your parents don't know about it and they don't need to. This is for the work you're going to do that they won't see coming." The account held $14,200. To a 17-year-old who had been told her entire life that her interests were impractical, it was more than money. It was evidence that someone had been paying attention. I went to Virginia Tech on a partial merit scholarship and a federal loan. Renata went to the University of Richmond on a full ride from my parents, who had been putting money into her college fund since she was born. I found out about the disparity in the summer before my sophomore year, not from my parents, but from a cousin who assumed I already knew. My parents had $47,000 saved for Renata's education. They had $3,000 saved for mine. The difference, my mother explained when I asked directly, was that Renata had always known what she wanted to do. The implication was that I had not. The reality was that I had known exactly what I wanted to do since I was 11 years old, and no one had been listening. I did not argue. I went back to Blacksburg and I worked. I majored in computer science and minored in applied mathematics. I worked 20 hours a week at the university's IT help desk. I ate dining hall food and wore the same 4 sweaters from October to March. I graduated in the top 7% of my class and was accepted into a master's program in software engineering at Duke University in Durham, North Carolina. My mother's response, when I called to tell her, was, "That's far." Renata's response, 2 days later, was to call and ask if I could explain to her what a master's program in software engineering actually involved, Because she was thinking about pivoting her marketing career into tech and wanted to understand the landscape. I spent 45 minutes on the phone explaining it to her. I did not think anything of it at the time. That was the pattern. I explained. She received. I had been trained to do it so thoroughly that it felt like generosity. Graduate school was where I first understood what I was actually capable of. I had a professor named Dr. Amara Osei who ran the Distributed Systems Lab and who had the specific gift of making difficult problems feel like invitations. She told me in my second semester that my thesis proposal, a framework for adaptive data routing in low-bandwidth environments, was the most original work she had seen from a first-year student in 6 years. She said it plainly, without ceremony, the way people say things they mean. I finished my thesis in 22 months. I called it Bridgelight, a name I chose because the whole premise was about connecting systems that couldn't otherwise reach each other, about building a bridge through the dark. I was 25 years old. I had $1,400 in my bank account, a thesis committee that had given me a standing ovation, and an idea I believed in completely. Renata called me the week after my thesis defense. She was living in Richmond by then, working for a mid-tier marketing firm, doing well enough on the surface but restless in the way she had always been restless, always looking for the next thing that would make her feel like she was becoming someone. She asked if she could come visit. I said yes. She stayed for 4 days. I showed her the Bridgelight framework. I walked her through the concept, the code structure, the market application. I was proud of it and I wanted someone in my family to understand what I had done. She asked good questions, the kind of questions that, looking back, were not curiosity but inventory. She was cataloging. She was learning just enough to speak the language without learning the grammar. On her last night in Durham, she said, "Darcy, you should let me help you take this somewhere. You're brilliant but you have no idea how to sell anything." That's what I do. Let me be involved. I said I would think about it. She left the next morning. I thought about it for 3 weeks. I was 25, exhausted, and lonely in the specific way that graduate school makes you lonely, surrounded by brilliant people who are all too busy to know you. I wanted someone from my family to believe in what I had built. I wanted my sister to be that person. I called her back and said yes. I want to pause here for a moment, because I know some of you watching this have been in exactly this position. You built something, a business, a skill, a reputation, a body of work, and someone you loved asked to be part of it. And you said yes because you were tired of being alone in it, and because some part of you still believed that the people who should have seen you were capable of seeing you. If that is you, drop the word bridge in the comments right now. Because what I did next is something I have turned over in my mind more times than I can count, and I want you to know that I understand what it cost. Now, back to the story. I drafted a consulting agreement. I did this because Dr. Osei had told me, more than once, to document everything. Your ideas are your property, she said. Treat them that way. The agreement gave Renata a 15% equity stake in any commercial entity built on the Bridgelight framework, in exchange for business development and investor relations work. She was not a co-founder. She was not a technical contributor. She was a consultant with a minority stake. Renata signed the agreement on March 4, 2018. I have the original, with her signature, in a manila folder that I have kept in the same fireproof box for 7 years. For the first 8 months, the arrangement was functional. Renata made calls, set up meetings, wrote pitch decks based on summaries I provided. I continued developing the platform. We had 2 serious investor conversations that fall. Both went well. Both asked technical questions that Renata could not answer, and both times she called me afterward and I coached her through the follow-up emails. Then, in November of 2018, Estelle had a stroke. She was 81 years old and she had been living alone in the farmhouse, which she had refused to leave, which the rest of the family had been arguing about for 2 years. The stroke was mild. She recovered most of her speech within 6 weeks, but it changed things. She moved into an assisted living facility in Salem. She gave me her grandmother's pearl earrings at Christmas that year, pressing them into my hand with both of hers and saying, "These are for you. Not for the house. Not for the family. For you." I put them in my jewelry box and thought about her saying that every time I opened it. Estelle died 14 months ago, in the early morning of a Thursday in January, in a room that smelled of lavender and clean linen. She was 83 years old. She died with her hands folded and her reading glasses on the nightstand and a copy of a Flannery O'Connor collection open on her lap. I was there. My father was there. My mother arrived an hour later. Renata sent flowers. The attorney who handled Estelle's estate called me 2 weeks after the funeral. His name was Mr. Aldridge, and he had a quiet, precise manner that I associated immediately with people who had learned to be careful with other people's most important things. He told me that Estelle had left me the farmhouse and its contents, valued at approximately $186,000. She had left my father her savings account. She had left Renata nothing, not out of cruelty, but because Renata had never visited the farmhouse in the last 4 years of Estelle's life, and Estelle had noticed. There was also a letter. Mr. Aldridge handed it to me in a sealed envelope with my name written on the front in Estelle's handwriting, the careful, looping cursive she had used her entire life. He said she had left instructions that it be given to me privately, not at the family reading. I did not open it until I was in my car. "My Darcy," it began. "I have been watching what is happening with your work and with your sister for 2 years now, and I want you to know that I see it clearly, even from here. You have always given more than you should have to people who took more than they deserved. I am not telling you this to make you angry. I am telling you because I want you to be ready. Keep your documents. Keep your dates. Keep your receipts. The truth has a way of needing to be produced, and when that moment comes, you will want to have it in your hands. I love you more than I have ever known how to say. You are the real thing, Darcy. Don't let anyone put their name on that." I sat in the parking lot of the attorney's office for 11 minutes. I did not cry. I folded the letter carefully and put it in my bag. Then I drove home and I opened the fireproof box and I checked every document inside it. I need to tell you what had been happening with Bridgelight in the 3 years before Estelle died, because it did not happen all at once. It happened the way erosion happens. Slowly, incrementally, in ways that are easy to explain away in the moment. By 2019, Renata had begun describing herself publicly as a co-founder of Bridgelight. Not to me, never directly to me. But on LinkedIn, in conversations with mutual contacts, at a startup networking event in Richmond that a friend of mine happened to attend. My friend texted me a screenshot. I called Renata. She said she was just simplifying for the audience, that co-founder was easier to explain than consultant, that it didn't mean anything structural. I told her to correct it. She said she would. She did not. In 2020, she registered a limited liability company in Virginia under the name Bridgelight Solutions, LLC. She used the name I had given the framework. She listed herself as the sole member. She did not tell me. I found out 6 months later when a potential investor contacted me through my professional email to ask about my role at Bridgelight Solutions, LLC, a company he had been in talks with and could not find any technical documentation for. I pulled the state business registry that afternoon. I sat at my desk for a long time looking at her name in the member field. I called a lawyer the next morning. Her name was Priya Nair, and she specialized in intellectual property and technology law, and she was the kind of person who made you feel, for the first time in a long time, like the facts were actually on your side. I brought the consulting agreement, the thesis documentation, the source code commit history with timestamps, the emails, the LLC filing. Priya looked at everything for 45 minutes and then she looked at me and said, "You have a very clean paper trail." We sent Renata a cease and desist letter in March of 2021. Renata called me screaming. It was the first time in my adult life I had heard her lose composure that completely. She said I was jealous of her, that I had always been jealous, that she had done all the real work of making Bridgelight into something and I was just the technical person in the background who couldn't talk to anyone. She said our mother would never forgive me for this. She said I was destroying the family. I let her finish. Then I said, "Renata, the consulting agreement you signed in 2018 defines your role and your equity stake. The LLC you registered using my work's name is a separate matter. Priya will be in touch." She dissolved the LLC within 30 days. But she did not stop. She could not stop, because stopping would have required her to rebuild an identity she had been constructing for 3 years, and she did not know who she was without the architecture she had built on top of my work. She started a podcast in 2022 called Building Bridgelight, in which she described herself as the visionary behind a groundbreaking adaptive routing platform. She gave interviews to 2 small tech publications. She spoke on a panel at a regional startup conference in Charlottesville. Every time, the story was the same: she had identified a gap in the market, she had developed a concept, she had built a team. I was not mentioned. My name appeared nowhere. I documented everything. Every interview, every podcast episode, every panel appearance. I kept a running file. Dated entries, source links, screenshots, transcripts. By the spring of this year, the file was 47 pages long. I want to pause here again, because I think some of you know exactly what this kind of slow erasure feels like. Not a single dramatic moment. Not one scene where someone looks you in the eye and takes something from you. Just a gradual rewriting, a quiet replacement, until one day you look up and realize that the story of your own work has been told so many times without you in it that some people genuinely believe the version without you. If you have ever watched someone else get credit for something you built, a project, a program, an idea, a reputation, drop the word "seen" in the comments. Because that is what this is about. Being seen. And what it costs when you are not. Now, back to the story. The Meridian Bridge Venture Fund was established in 2021 by 3 partners out of Washington, D.C., to provide seed funding for technology platforms with social infrastructure applications. Their focus was exactly the kind of work Bridgelight was designed for: adaptive systems for low-resource environments, rural connectivity, public sector applications. When I read about the fund in a technology journal in the fall of last year, I felt something I can only describe as recognition. This was the room my work was supposed to be in. I submitted a formal application in January of this year. I submitted it under my own name and my own credentials. I attached my thesis, my source documentation, my commit history, and a technical brief I had written over 3 weekends in December. The application was 41 pages. I had Dr. Osei write a letter of support. I had 2 colleagues from my current position. I work as a senior systems architect at a non-profit technology firm in Durham. Write letters confirming my authorship of the core framework. I heard back in February. The selection committee wanted to schedule a technical interview. What I did not know until 3 days before that interview was that Renata had also applied. She had submitted an application under Bridgelight Solutions, LLC, the same name she had dissolved in 2021, which she had apparently re-registered in a different state, and she had described herself as the founder and sole architect of the Bridgelight platform. Her application included a technical summary that I recognized immediately as a paraphrase of my own thesis abstract, rewritten just enough to obscure the source. My lawyer called me when she found out. Her voice was careful and even. "Darcy," she said, "I think you need to be in that room." The awards ceremony and announcement was held on a Thursday evening at the Whitmore Convention Center in Richmond. 411 people. A reception first, then remarks, then the grant announcement. I arrived at 6:47 p.m. in a gray wool dress and flat leather shoes. I checked in under my own name. I found my seat in the 3rd row. I had not told Renata I was coming. I had, however, called Dr. Constance Farrow, the chair of the selection committee, 2 weeks earlier. I had asked for 15 minutes of her time. She gave me 30. I brought the manila envelope. I walked her through every document in it, in order, with dates. Dr. Farrow listened without interrupting. When I finished, She looked at the documents for a long moment and then she said, "Ms. Ellison, I appreciate you bringing this to my attention. I need to discuss this with my partners." She called me 4 days later and said, "We are going to need you in the room. I want to tell you about the moment Renata walked to the podium, because I want to be accurate about what I felt. I did not feel rage. I had expected to feel rage, and I had prepared myself for it, but what I actually felt was something quieter and more specific. A kind of grief. The way you feel grief when something you hoped was not true turns out to be exactly as true as you feared. She was wearing the navy blazer and our grandmother's pearl earrings. She had note cards. She smiled at the room the way she had always smiled at rooms, with that particular ease that had been her greatest asset her entire life. She began speaking about her journey as a founder. She used the word vision 4 times in the first 2 minutes. She described the moment she had conceived of Bridgelight, a description that bore no relationship to any moment that had actually occurred. And she described building the platform with a small technical team whose contributions she was grateful for. I was the small technical team. I had never been paid as a technical team. I had been paid as a consultant for 8 months in 2018 and 2019, and then the payments had simply stopped, and when I had raised it, Renata had said the company was not yet generating revenue and she would make it right when it was. She spoke for 11 minutes. The room was attentive. The applause when she finished was warm and genuine. Then Dr. Farrow walked to the podium. She thanked the audience. She thanked the applicants. She said that the selection process this year had been, in her word, illuminating. She paused on that word in a way that made the room very slightly quieter. She said that the Meridian Bridge Venture Fund was committed to funding not just innovative technology, but the people who actually built it. She said that in the course of this year's selection process, the committee had become aware of a documentation concern related to one of the finalist applications, and that the committee had conducted a thorough review. Renata was still on the stage, standing to the side of the podium. I watched her face. I watched the specific moment when she understood that something was happening that she had not planned for. Dr. Farrow said that the $2.4 million seed grant for the Bridgelight adaptive routing platform would be awarded to its original architect and documented creator. She said the name. She said my name. I stood up from the third row. I did not hurry. I walked to the stage at the same pace I had walked into the building. My hands did not shake. I noticed that. I climbed the 3 steps to the stage and I shook Dr. Farrow's hand and I turned to face 411 people, and for a moment I did not say anything at all. I just stood there and let the room be what it was. Renata was 4 feet to my left. I did not look at her. I said, "Thank you. I have been working on this for 7 years. I am glad it is finally in the right hands." That was all I said. The applause that followed was different from the applause for Renata. It was slower to start, because the room was still processing what had just happened, and then it built into something real. What happened after I left the stage is something I know partly from what I witnessed and partly from what 3 different people told me in the days that followed. Renata did not leave the stage immediately. She stood there for a moment that I am told lasted approximately 8 seconds. Long enough to be visible, not long enough to recover from. Then she walked down the steps and through a side door and did not return to the reception. 2 of the journalists in the room had been covering the event for a regional technology publication and a national non-profit sector newsletter. Both of them sought me out during the reception. I spoke with them for a combined total of 40 minutes. I brought the manila envelope. I showed them the consulting agreement, the thesis documentation, the commit history. I did not editorialize. I showed them the dates and let them draw their own conclusions. The article in the regional publication ran 5 days later. The headline was straightforward: Grant Committee corrects attribution in Bridgelight Award. It described the documentation I had provided and noted that the original application had contained representations that were inconsistent with the technical record. It quoted Dr. Farrow. It quoted me. It did not quote Renata, who had not responded to requests for comment. The article in the national newsletter ran the following week. It was longer and more detailed, and it included a section on intellectual property documentation practices for early-stage technology founders. Dr. Osei was quoted. My consulting agreement was described, though not reprinted in full. The piece was shared 412 times in the first 48 hours. My mother called me on the morning the first article ran. I let it go to voicemail. Her message was 4 minutes and 20 seconds long. I listened to it once. She said that I had humiliated the family. She said that Renata was devastated. She said that I had always been competitive with my sister and that this was the worst expression of it she had ever seen. She said that my grandmother would be ashamed of me. I did not call her back that day. I called my father instead. He picked up on the second ring. There was a long silence after I said hello, and then he said, "Darcy, I owe you an apology. Not just for this. For a lot of things." His voice was the voice of a man who had been quiet for too long and had run out of reasons to stay that way. I let your mother set the terms for too long. I'm sorry. It was not a complete accounting. It did not undo 34 years. But it was real, and I knew the difference between real and performed, and that was real. I said, "Thank you, Dad." And I meant it. Renata called me 9 days after the ceremony. I answered because I wanted to hear what she would say. She said that she had worked hard for Bridgelight and that I was not acknowledging her contributions. She said that the business development work she had done was just as important as the technical work. She said that I had embarrassed her in front of people who mattered to her career. I let her finish. Then I said, "Renata, the consulting agreement we both signed describes your role and your equity stake. That agreement is still valid. Your 15% stake in any commercial entity built on the Bridgelight framework has not changed. What changed is that the public record now accurately reflects who built the framework. Those are 2 separate things." She said, "You did this to punish me." I said, "I did this because Dr. Pharaoh asked me to be in the room." There was a silence. "Grandma's earrings," I said. "She gave them to me." "She gave them to me specifically. I would like them back." Another silence. Then she said, "I'll mail them." They arrived 6 days later in a small padded envelope with no note. I opened the envelope at my kitchen table and held them in my palm for a moment. They were small gold hoops with a single freshwater pearl on each one. Estelle had worn them every Sunday for 30 years. I put them on. The Bridgelight grant is now in the process of being formally transferred. Priya is handling the legal work. The platform will be developed through a new entity, my entity, with a technical advisory board that includes Dr. Ose and 2 colleagues from my current firm. The first deployment is planned for a rural connectivity initiative in 3 counties in eastern North Carolina, which is exactly the kind of application I imagined when I named it Bridgelight in the first place. I still work at the non-profit technology firm in Durham. I still live in the same apartment I have lived in for 4 years, with a small porch that gets afternoon light and a kitchen that smells like coffee and old wood. I have a partner named James who is a high school math teacher and who understood, from the first time I explained Bridgelight to him, exactly what it was and exactly what it meant. He made me dinner the night of the ceremony and did not ask me to talk about it until I was ready. I think about Estelle often. I think about her at her kitchen table with her hands around her coffee mug, telling me that the work tells the truth even when the people don't. I think about the letter she left me, the careful looping cursive, the specific instruction to keep my documents and my dates and my receipts. She had seen this coming from farther away than I had. She had been preparing me for it for 20 years. I did not go to the ceremony to destroy my sister. I went because the work deserved to be in the right hands, and because I had spent 7 years building something real and I was not willing to watch it be claimed by someone who could not explain its most basic function. That is not revenge. That is documentation. That is what Estelle taught me, not to fight loudly, but to keep the record clean. There is a kind of family that teaches you your worth is conditional, that your intelligence is only valuable when it serves someone else's story, that your work is a resource to be borrowed without credit, that your silence is the price of belonging. I paid that price for a long time. I paid it in the form of phone calls where I explained my own work to someone who was cataloging it. I paid it in the form of years of watching my name disappear from something I had built. I paid it in the form of a family dinner table where my second place ribbon went in a drawer and my sister's speech certificate went on the wall. I am not paying it anymore. If you are watching this and you recognize something in it, if you have ever handed your work to someone who took it and called it their own, if you have ever been the one in the corner reading the manual while someone else got the applause, if you have ever been told that your kind of intelligence doesn't count, I want you to know something. The work tells the truth. It always does. You just have to keep the record clean and be willing to be in the room when the truth needs to be produced. Keep your documents. Keep your dates. Keep your receipts. And keep going. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.